America, my name is Osei-Frimpong. I come to you every Thursday about usually this time. Today I'm going to do a special show because I have a congressional candidate who's coming on to interview. And while he's finishing up some of his business, I'm going to talk a little bit about, Black people are our understanding of the Ukraine conflict. So let me tell you, I've been in the South for a good number of years now, and I was born in California, but I am, I've been here for a few years, and I will tell you that the state legislature right now is pretty much the Klan. You got Republicans who are the Klan, and then Democrats who are confused about why they should jeopardize their relationships with the Klan, and you have this enormous Black population that's not getting served by its democratically elected government because the people are anti-Black, right? So we need some huge cultural intervention to make fewer anti-Black people who will then elect fewer anti-Black or white supremacists statewide electors, right? So until you get that, the idea of a robust democracy at the state level is kind of ridiculous. For example, any reparations program that's going to come through the United States is going to be implemented. It's implemented is going to have to have at the federal level. It's going to have to happen at the federal level. That means, federal people with federal guns making a big federal stink about how Black people should get land, money, and get paid and everything, right? So any real reparations plan is going to have to be implemented at the federal level. It can't be implemented at the state level because the states are racist. So what does this mean for us? It means that when this plan is implemented, it's going to feel like a foreign invasion to no small number of Southern people. It's going to feel as if the state rolled up tanks to their state government, or rolled up tanks to their hookup contract that they've been getting for the last 30 years or whatever, last 4 generations, and is now trying to take away money like food from their plate to deliver it to Negroes. That's what it's going to feel like to no small number of white people. And those white people, a lot of them have guns, are going to want to use their guns to defend their way of life from a state takeover or from a federal takeover. So I'll say this again, when we implement reparations, it's going to feel like a foreign invasion to South Carolina. It's going to feel like a foreign invasion to Louisiana. It's going to feel like a foreign invasion to Virginia and Georgia and even Florida. It will be experienced by them like a foreign invasion of federal bodies overthrowing their duly elected state authorities, because their duly elected state authorities are racist, right? So if we're serious about reparations, it's going to feel like a foreign invasion to them. And make no mistake, when if like a foreign autocrat dictator were to like roll up to Atlanta, or roll up into Charleston, or roll up into Columbia, or roll up into, the state capital, Baton Rouge, I think Louisiana, of any of these states, and say like, look, we're gonna take over the state, but Black people, we're gonna make a deal for you. And then I had the Speaker of the State House, the democratically elected Speaker of the State House, talk to me, and then the representative of the autocrat authoritarian government talk to me and say like, the Speaker of the State House would say, Iremy, I need you to organize Black people so that our state legislatures aren't overtaken by this foreign authority. And on the other hand, the foreign autocratic authority said like, look, Iremy, we can deal with you, and we can probably get you a better deal for Black people in our regime than you have in this current regime. I'll be honest, I want to hear what the autocrat has to say, because I do not trust democracy, because I know, not because I'm like ignorant about state politics, but because I know state politics too well. So the idea of the Georgia state legislature being overthrown by a foreign power isn't really that threatening to me. Is it really that? Like, I want to know what the foreign power offers. Because my day-to-day life might be not only better, but more empowered. I want to know what the foreign power offers. I want to know. So this idea that we should immediately just kind of assume that I don't know, we should knee-jerk side with the Ukrainians in this. I don't know. It's complicated. I need to know more about, because there are a lot of neo-Nazis in Ukraine. And let's be honest, and I don't like the war. Why don't I like? I don't like the war for a few reasons. But one is that I don't like the idea of a bunch of Ukrainian refugees coming to the United States, and within weeks' time, the fourth word they learn is going to be the N word, and it's going to be with the hard R, because they're going to want to be an American, and part of what it is to be an American is to treat black people like garbage. So that's one reason I don't want a war. I don't want to have to deal with Ukrainian white people coming over here and treating me like trash, because that's what that is. That's possible. I'm going to talk more about this on Thursday, but and two generations, all of a sudden they're too good to go to school with our kids and all that stuff. So I don't want that. Also, I believe in state boundaries. I think sovereign nations matter, but people have a kind of a confused or underappreciated notion of what sovereignty means. But just know that black people need to have a complicated relationship with democracy. Yeah, it's none of us business. It's none of our business. Yeah, what's going on it's not about us. It could end in a nuclear holocaust. One thing we definitely shouldn't do is start giving guns over to the Ukrainians, because I don't know. I think that'll just end with more death. We should gently urge them to negotiate a surrender. Yeah. So, like I said, I don't know about the people watching at home, but if a foreign power were to roll up into if a foreign power were to roll up into the state capitol here in Georgia, and the current speaker of the House of the state capitol here in Georgia asked me to rally up the blacks to fight the foreign power who's going to take over the state, I would say maybe. And then first I would want to talk to the foreign state. I would like to talk to the foreign. Maybe black people get a better deal under this foreign government than the current state legislature, because it's not as if democratically elected state legislatures are working particularly good when black people don't control any of the cultural mechanism that actually goes to forming the electorate. So you have a democracy without any sort of democratic influence. So that's a little bit bizarre. And so I am not fighting for Georgia. I'm not fighting anybody for Georgia. I'm not if I'm in South Carolina and someone would say you need to fight Russia, if then the Russian tanks come into the to the state capital, I think it's Columbia, in South Carolina, and say and the white Southerners say you need to fight for the pride of South Carolina. You need to fight these Russians. I would say no. I want to hear what the Russians have to say, because it's quite possible that black people will do better in South Carolina under whatever kind of proxy regime they have, rather than the neo-colonialism they're living in right now. So it's just different forms of colonialism is what we're talking about. And I want to hear what the other side has to offer. Because right now, black people need to admit that we're an internal colony. Black people in the South are an internal colony, to white Southerners. And what that means is something we're going to have to actually get up. But right now, I have a guest today. We're talking to Derek Marshall. Derek Marshall's running for Congress in California. And, I like talking to congressional candidates. And we're going to talk about jobs. He seemed like a bright guy. I saw him in an interview a few days or last week. I emailed his campaign. He decided to come on. So we're going to talk about jobs, and I'm going to give you guys a little bit of clinic on how to talk to congressional candidates. And he's a big boy. He can take it. So we're going to talk about jobs in your district. You live in, this is Derek Marshall. Say hi to the people, Derek.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, good. All right. So you live in a big agricultural district in California, right? So that's a big jobs, a big employer in California 23. Is that correct?
Actually, we are not. So the Central Valley is more where the farms are. We have a couple of farms, but that is not our main industry.
All right. So
you would, yeah.
Yeah. What's your industrial base?
So we have a lot of, so there's a lot of warehouse, a lot of manufacturing, a lot of healthcare, a lot of services. And so that's kind of like the jobs that are local are more kind of in that, in that direction. There are a couple of farms, but they're a little bit more, how do I say this? They're more boutique type farms, like where people will go and pick apples and, do the whole, yes.
Yeah, I'm not worried about making sure that those people get paid. I want the people picking the almonds and the
exactly.
the strawberries and the tomatoes. I want to figure out how they're going to get paid. All right, so you're outside of Bakersfield. You're between LA and Bakersfield in California.
So it's between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. So we're in the Victor Valley. So we're up in the Victor Valley.
Okay, good. All right. So in terms of jobs, Americans need to get working, and they need to get working in good with real wages, right? Mm-hmm. So what's your plan? How are you going to get Americans working, and what does it mean? This is a good question. Can you be free in these United States if you don't have access to a good job?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I like to say, the U.S. is one of the least free countries that I've ever been to. And I've been to almost 50 different countries. And the reason for it is just like the amount of financial anxiety that people are dealing with. So whether it's financial anxiety from, medical bills, whether it is financial anxiety from student loan debt, or whether it's just financial anxiety about whether, or not you're going to be able to pay the rent this month. So my kind of thing is, I think it's comprehensive. It's all of these things. And it's kind of like declaring war on financial anxiety. We're the richest country in the history of the world. There's no reason that we cannot be like, that we can be like a lot of other countries. I was actually with my partner in Ukraine this past year, and we were having a conversation about, the Ukrainian GDP per capita, which was about, I think it was $5,000 a year compared to the US, which is somewhere in the ballpark of $50,000 per year. And guess what? The Ukrainians have a single payer healthcare system. They have tuition-free college education. They have large stocks of social housing. And so what I would like to see is us be able to robustly kind of provide that in the United States. And then the only other thing I'll say is just in terms of my theoretical framework, I've been very much inspired by Stephanie Kelton and some elements of modern monetary theory, which in my mind is kind of like Keynesian economics 2.0. Which is just robust government spending. We need to start investing in our people again.
Yeah, we need to invest in them in a way that allows them to be more productive, right? Because we don't want to lead to more inflation. There's great, I'm a big fan of the federal job guarantee. I think we need to secure people access. You can't be free in the United States unless you have access to secure access to a good job and a fair say in your working conditions. And I say, we thrive at 25. So, $25 guaranteed job. If you're willing to work, the government will find a place for you to work at $25 an hour, and it'll be a unionized job where you have a fair say in your working place. And that's just like what it means to actually be politically free. Because I'm not really convinced you can be politically free if you're dependent on a particular boss. And I like under all of these financial anxiety. John Adams agrees with me, and there's some other people too. But you need a quality financial security in order to be free. Because as it stands, we're just kind of walking liabilities. At any point in time, I can get either anything from a traffic ticket to like a broken ankle, and like I'm just a walking liability. Unless you have access to real money, that liability that matters, right? So yeah, so we live in a quality of precarity, and I think there are government policies that will allow us to be more productive. Once I'm not like anxious financially, and and if we're more productive, it won't lead to inflation while still putting money into our pockets as like people who need money to live.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree with what you're saying more.
Right. Well, a lot of people, a lot of Democrats get caught because they talk about increased government spending without pegging that government spending to productivity. I think we can make Americans more productive. I know in Athens, Georgia, if I go about, might not be the case in California, but if I go about 7 miles outside of my place right here in any direction except towards Atlanta, I don't have internet. Like I don't have there's no internet. Like so the idea, but there are just people without internet. So like especially in a pandemic economy, you're not really as productive as you could be if you're not networked. You don't have the communications infrastructure to actually participate in like our robust economy. So just putting people to work to guarantee the quality of infrastructure that will make people more productive, and then paying them to work is where I think that freedom can be realized within our economy.
Absolutely. And I mean, we're facing the greatest existential threat to our species that we probably have ever experienced with global climate change. And so there's this interesting, we can adopt two birds with one bird bath by, kind of completely pivoting the economy to being able to like transition away from, the destructive fossil economy into the green economy with bullet trains and with solar jobs and overhauling the grid. There's really, and particularly for a district like mine where right now there's only 13% of folks up here with a higher education degree. There's a real need for good, solid trade jobs. And in our district that has a lot of desert land, it has a lot of former disturbed mines. There is the federal jobs guarantee and the community jobs guarantee would basically provide tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of new high quality union jobs for local folks up here. And so that's what the Green New Deal means to me.
And it would also make your area a little bit more livable, insofar as like not only would it like put money in the pockets of the people, but the services provided would like it would more solar panels and more like it would actually like make more people want to move there and increase the local GDP of the valley.
Exactly. We have bill.
Your sound is starting to break up a little bit.
How is that?
A little bit.
Okay. So I was just going to say, there's a train that goes from to Los Angeles, and
I'm sorry, Derek. Your sound, it was great, and then like about 30 seconds ago, it just became choppy. I don't know. Do you have an idea? Maybe reboot the computer. I don't know.
Let me try. Hold on 1 second.
Oh, hey, I think it's back.
Is that back? Okay. All right. Talking now. How is that?
We're good. You're good. Talk.
Okay,
all right. So you had
good.
the train. What happened?
So the train. So Victorville to Los Angeles is 2 to 3 hours, and so being able to come up with different projects where in theory it should only take an hour and some change, and so services like that to be able to get folks. And there's a huge chunk of the folks up here that drive into Los Angeles every day. 20-30% that drive hour one way, 2 hour one way.
That's a huge percentage of your town.
Yeah.
That commute, like, that is unfortunate.
We're a bedroom community for Los Angeles at this point. I mean, the Victor Valley, I like to say it's a small to medium size. It's the ninth fastest growing metropolitan region in the country, driven by all the folks that are being priced out of LA because of gentrification and everything else, moving up the hill. In good traffic, you can get to downtown LA in about 45 minutes. So, not great, but reasonable.
Yeah.
But the problem is that with traffic, we just need small to medium sized services. So public transport, trains, light rail, etc.
Yeah, good. So you want to get your people working in the congressional district, and it's been redrawn so that it's heavily historically Republican,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't necessarily that bad of necessarily like a death knell if you have access to the candidate. So is the Republican candidate going to debate you?
So that's a great question. I have no idea at this point. The good news for us is that we've been getting about 2 percentage points more Democratic year on year. The other unique thing about our exurban rural area is that it's super progressive. It went for Bernie in the primary, and so the type of Democrats out here generally tend to be more progressive Democrats, which totally flies in the direction you hear a lot of sort of establishment narratives around oh, we have to play it to this concept of economic center in order to win, and that just is not true. If you're gonna win Republicans by talking about investing in federal jobs and contextualizing like that. If you're going to win them over with any arguments, you're not going to win them over with kind of playing it safe and means testing. Not in a district where more than 50% of people are struggling to pay their rent, and that's of all colors and sizes and shapes. And so, I'm interested to see what my opponent Jay Overnolte decides to do. He's an interesting character. He likes to kind of both sides it. He's not quite as in your face as like a Marjorie Taylor Greene, but if you take a look at his voting record, it's terrible. I mean, it's in lockstep with like the furthest right of the right wing populist.
So I have an issue with congressional candidates, and one of the reasons why I wanted to start interviewing them is that they don't seem to have access to the media that they should. Mm-hmm. And in order for the voters to make informed decisions, they need to be able to actually see the candidates on stage, fielding the same questions, and then asking each other questions. And like that's the way we can make good decisions as an electorate. But both the parties and the general, like they seem to have it's complicated relationship with open deliberative democracy. And I want to know that, well, first of all, I would be for pressing for some sort of constitutional amendment that every congressional candidate has to agree to sit for at least 3 debates every election cycle. And like whether you call it subpoena power or anything like that, or it could just be a party policy that's then just enculturated that like, well, you want the office, you have to sit, because a lot of people in safe congressional districts like just won't debate, right? So it's an open question whether your Republican challenger will debate you, and I think that's unfortunate for the electorate who's going to have to decide between you two. And would you be okay with some sort of mandate that Congress people are expected to sit for debates with their challengers at least 3 times per election cycle?
Totally. I mean, I would be for a complete campaign overhaul. Some type of policy. I mean, again, having lived in Germany and having been to other societies where their elections last for a month and a half. It's it's publicly financed, and each side gets exactly a certain percentage of media time. That's the type of election that I would be very interested in. And so, like, yes, I think mandated sitting, debating, public financing, I think all of that would be really, really important, because the reality is that there are so many candidates right now that are accepting corporate donations in order to be able to just be able to buy themselves a little bit of media time. And in a district like mine, it's really interesting because we're actually part of the Los Angeles media market. Even though we are the exurban and rural areas, if we want to have a spot on television, we're paying the exact same amount as as if I was running in downtown Los Angeles. So yes, I think that I would like to see a lot of reforms. I think definitely there should be some type of public, whether it's on NPR or some type of public allowance for different candidates, splitting it evenly so that the electorate can make an informed decision. Yes, I'd be 100% in favor of that.
Yeah. So how is it for you when you call the paper? Do they take your calls, or like how are you at getting media attention? How has that been?
Yeah, so we just kind of pivoted into into starting that whole thing. We hired a PR company that has been starting to kind of chase after different folks and do that whole kind of media song and dance. Uh, Particularly out here, there's a lot of pay to play, so it's I won't I won't throw anyone under the bus, but there definitely we've had some conversations and they're like, "Oh yeah, for sure, you're great. This is wonderful. We're Democrats too." And then we sit down and they're like, "Oh, and here's here's what we're thinking in terms of cost," and it's it's a sizable chunk of change. So
Yeah.
I think um, yeah, it's definitely I mean, just like fundraising, there's a whole kind of strategy that you have to fundraise. There's a whole strategy that you have for media. There's a whole it's ridiculous. I mean, we should not have to be running like this. We should not have to be sort of in this position of needing to kind of like get lucky just to present, hey, here's our ideas in contrast to these ideas over here.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Right. So I mean we think we can get the policies we want. You think you can get your Green New Deal. I think I can get my federal job guarantee or health care. We think we can get the policies we want without changing the processes through which people become policymakers. And I just don't think that works that way. I think I'm pretty sure that all of the great ideas get killed in process. We're just rational enough to like generate solutions in theory, and we're just distorted enough to kill those um, great ideas in process. So, like we look at so I think the story of our democracy is in the candidates who don't make it to on stage, the bills that don't make it out of committee, the things like where things go to die. Um, is what we need to fix in order to actually kind of vivify our democracy if we're going to do it in any sort of way. And we don't understand how things are squelched. So you are allowed to run, but do you really have a viable chance of winning if you don't have any sort of cultural power to make your presence known? Like that's the that's why I think our democracy dies and where our democracy fails in a lot of ways. We have these policing measures that kill or abort well conceived policies, and we just don't talk about the policing measures. Like in theory, anyone should be able to run for Congress. Anyone in the district should be able to run for Congress. But tell me, practically, what does it take to run for Congress?
Yeah, it takes money. It takes a lot of money, and it takes time as well. So as a candidate, if you're going to be able to, like let's say for example, for me, we've raised over $400,000 so far. Which is pretty good for for a first term, for a first time candidate. And the way that I've done that is just by I have three or four phones in front of me, and I've created my own dialer, and I'm dialing through to get individual donations. So I have these lists, whether it's a Bernie list or different types of lists, and I'm just calling through, and a lot of them are $20, $50, $100 donations. Sometimes I get lucky and it's a max out donation, but it's a lot of work. I spend 6, 7, 8 hours a day in order to raise the money that then allows me to be able to hire a team that then allows us to be able to get a PR company who then is kind of like helping to chase after different media things. And it's it's again it's ridiculous. We shouldn't have to do that, right? We should be able to there's got to be a better way.
That's a lot of time you spend trying to get people to give you money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially since you're trying to push policies that are supposed to be for people without money, right? So, or it's supposed to be for people who are like who are not driven by money. So, what does that do to the kind of policies you can articulate?
Yeah, for sure. So, it's interesting because we don't take corporate donations. I work even harder than than if I were. And it's really interesting because I've had a couple of folks that have actually not donated to the campaign because I refuse to take corporate donations. I talked to this one Democratic analyst, and we had a fantastic conversation. And then she said, "Let me ask, are you taking corporate donations? And what's your stance there?" And so I thought, I'm going to knock this one out of the park. Like, no, I'm not taking corporate donations. Like, I don't want to be, bought and sold by the big corporations. And look, I can respect that answer. She's like, but I'm not going to donate to your campaign because, that is not that's not a serious answer. And, I said, look, but look at how much we've raised compared to all these other candidates that are. And she's like, okay, well, it's impressive. She's like, but that is just not that's not a realistic thing. And, I just said, okay, well, we're going to have to agree to disagree. And yeah.
Well, one thing I like, one argument I hear against corporate donations that I wish more people actually used was that corporations who have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders, their money isn't speech as much as it's marketing. And it should be marketing. That's perfectly appropriate. They have a fiduciary responsibility to drive profit for their shareholders. But that's free marketing. That's not free speech. I allow people to money might be speech, but money comes from citizens who are trying to articulate their voice, not companies who are determined by shareholder interests, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So there's going to be a qualitative difference between the money that comes from a citizen and the money that comes from an entity that is determined not by their judgment, but by shareholder interest and shareholder profit. And confusing those two gets you, a little bit confused. Wendy Brown has a good book called Undoing the Demos, which kind of goes over this. But I wish people just were clear about the difference between speech and marketing and how businesses are in the marketing business. That's a fine business. It's just not the same thing as speech, which is for judgment and thought and reason.
Absolutely. Yeah. And fundamentally, at the end of the day, it's in the pursuit of, the growth of shareholder wealth as opposed to the common good.
Right.
And so, and that's fundamentally the biggest issue with corporate, dollars in our government is that the government is set up to benefit the common good. And here you've got these organizations, right, that are
particular interests
directly against.
Right. They have particular interests and that's fine. They can chase their particular interests, but not through politics. They can do it in the marketplace. That's fine. But that's so again, the distinction there I think is important. So that's $400,000, that's hours a day on the phone getting money. And I was just thinking, there are two things you can do as a progressive congressperson. It's enact legislation. And if you can do that, great, enact the perfect legislation. But if you can't, you have to clarify the fight. You either enact the legislation or clarify the fight. And yet we have a lot of Congress people who neither enact legislation and they leave people more confused about what needs to be done. How does that what's going on there? And look, I'm not a huge fan of former President Obama. I think he confused a lot of people. He was very good at getting himself elected, but not very good at either enacting a legislation or clarifying the fight. I think people were so confused after the end of 8 years, they elected Trump. That's when you lost a bunch of state legislative seats, and every Democrat not named Obama took a hit because of Obama was confusing everybody. So why are Democrats so scared of clarifying the fight? And why are they so comfortable confusing people as to what our problems are?
Yeah, well, first of all, I love that framing. I hadn't thought about it exactly in that term, but that's a great way to frame it. I think so. I'm an organizer, in my heart, and I'm an organizer candidate, and so I came from the realm of being an organizer, and so my kind of theory of change and theory of building working class power, is really rooted in community organizing. And so my particular, opinion and political opinion for the way that we should be building political power is through the vehicle of community organizing. So strengthening our communities. And this is, if we're real, this is something that the Republicans have been doing since Barry Goldwater's Republicans in the 1960s, right? Going out and, building, community power. And by the way, it is a way that we used to organize back in the 20s and the 30s. You think about, Italian union halls with, big pasta dinners and stuff like that. And so I think that as we pivot back to that style of campaigning, i.e., strengthening community, I think that we're going to be, I think that we're going to see a lot of candidates that are going to start to advocate for, for better working, for better like working class policy. And so, and the reason why I bring that up is because right now, the advocacy of working class policy, let's take AB 1400 or single payer healthcare, is clarifying the fight. And if I look at like the trajectory from 562, let's say, to AB 1400 over the past 5 or 6 years, and having been a part of the SB 562 fight, that was really an element of helping to shift the Overton window, helping to clarify the fight. And I think a lot of Democrats are afraid of doing that, particularly a lot of establishment Democrats are afraid of doing that because their campaigning is rooted in the corporate donations, is rooted in a very specific cookie cutter model of being able to build power that is what I would consider to be superficial mobilization efforts in order to get elected, as opposed to progressive organizing, which is not superficial. It goes all the way down to the community level. I think that when we look at candidates like Bernie, if we look at other candidates, Bernie called himself the organizer in chief, and I think that the element there that was so important was that it was going all the way down to the grassroots. It was going all the way down. And
I like the distinction that maybe we can flesh out between mobilizing people who are already there and then like actually organizing and create, because I think real leaders create electorates. They don't just kind of organize, they don't just kind of deal with the ones who are already there. They actually grow people's capacity to govern. You're creating an electorate. You're changing the way they think about the role in government in their lives. And then they grow, and when you grow someone's capacity to govern, you're growing their capacity to govern both themselves and with other people. And that's the work, not just merely taking people as they are and getting them to the polls. And, actually helping people understand the role of government in their life and how it is necessary to secure freedom in their families, necessary to secure freedom in their jobs, necessary to secure freedom in the political sphere, necessary to secure freedom like internationally. Like that's the work of, I think, a political campaign. And I like, one of the things I liked about your campaign is that you seemed really serious about like doing the voter education and the voter development so that then they can make, a better decision. And that's good for you as a candidate, and that's good for you as for the voters, but that's different than simply mobilizing people as they are already there and then like shoving them at the polls.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's who I am. I mean, that's one of my core philosophies in life is really helping to strengthen and empower all of us to sort of like whether it is helping folks to get rid of their financial anxiety so that they can like figure out what their purpose on this planet is in terms of what they're supposed to be doing and what type of beauty they're supposed to bring to the world. Sorry, I know I sound a little bit like a hippie. We do have Joshua Tree in the district. And then there's also an element of and I'll preface this by saying, I've knocked on about, I was calculating the other day, about 50,000 doors over the last, like, let's say 5 or 6 years. So I've done a lot of, door knocking and canvassing and that type of work in my role as an organizer. And then this past year, I made 50,000 phone calls to donors, and it was a really interesting comparison to compare the two worlds. And and kind of, if anything, I am more convinced than ever of my convictions from the 5 years before, where I was out organizing with people and sitting at folks' dinner tables, than I am after this past year of talking with let's call them the donor class.
Yeah. So what happens so a lot of good people get elected and then they either become mute or they start saying like, well, I'm working an inside game now. So I feel like we have a very secret plan to get this great legislation through, and then it gets taken. And what happened, and how won't Like, why are you different? Why won't you get shook? Like, we all used to believe in the squad, right? But then, and okay, as AOC came in and like she actually had a lot of power when she was protesting outside of Nancy Pelosi's office. People actually had to listen to her. And now it's like, Mama Bear. And like, and what happens? What is it about the ecosystem, and how are you different that you won't just get taken? And like even Bernie got taken on Build Back Better. He even admits that, like, yeah, I got spun on that one. So like, what corrupts people, and how won't you get spun?
Totally. So first of all, I'm going to be honest here for a second. And my honest answer is I have no idea. I have no idea what's going to happen once we're elected, once I'm there, what type of, when I'm fighting for a single payer healthcare system, what deal in the background is going to like that I have to come out in favor of one thing that's going to, is going to, make certain parts of the left like come out and like, want to murder me on Twitter. I don't know. And that's my honest answer. Like I really don't know. I don't know. And so all I can say is that I am a man of conviction. And I think if you talk to any friends of mine, I'm 39 right now, but if you talk to my college friends, I had lunch the other day with a college friend, and I've been consistent in demanding a single payer healthcare system. I think just because I spent time in Northern Europe and work there and stuff like that, in my mind, it is the craziest thing ever that we don't have a single payer healthcare system.
Look,
it is the
I'll be honest.
Craziest. Yeah.
I don't think we're very close. I don't think we're any closer than we were 30 years ago in 92. Like it's not really clear to me that we've made that much progress in the discourse. So we have to figure out there's something wrong with the way we do our government that's keeping us from single payer healthcare. And it's not getting better. It's not like, well, we're closer. I was telling people before, and I tell my audience all the time, we're not any closer to single payer healthcare than we were to reparations. Then we need reparations because that's the only way we're going to get Black people whole. But to think that like, well, we're really close to this, and like, no, we're not. We're also not really close to a better union movement until we actually we need a bigger cultural change that needs to be fomented somehow, some way, but like we're not close to these things. And so the compromises we make to get ourselves closer is like, I think it's an illusion.
Yeah, so I think what you say is like I agree in the sense. So I agree and I disagree. The reason that I disagree is because I think that the work that's needed is actually this grassroots organizing. So one of my favorite kind of organizing books is Jane McAlevy's Organizing for Power in the New Gilded Age, and right now they do all these organizing workshops a couple times a year, and everyone can hop in, and and her framework about like the deep community organizing has informed a lot of my feeling about community organizing. And so the reason why I think that we're closer is because I think that we're now starting to organize like we used to organize in the 20s and the 30s, particularly when I think about my friends that are assaulting right now at different companies, and I've got one friend that just won a union a couple of months back. And so I'm seeing a lot of work that's happening down there, and so that's giving me a lot of optimism because I see the work that's happening kind of at the grassroots level. Where I agree with you is that we have to be fearless at the top. So again, using your framework before about passing legislation or clarifying the fight, I'm going to steal that from you.
Yeah, that's why I do these interviews.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. So I think you're right. I think top like up here, that's something that needs to happen. And I think that the way that more folks are going to feel it's the safety in numbers thing. And I feel like a lot of folks are feeling safer, are going to start to feel safer to be able to, to kind of come out and say, hey, the Iron Dome might not make sense, or, say things that, that like even a couple of years ago would have been political suicide. I think that the Overton window is shifting very quickly because of, the generational change, but also because of, because of COVID and geopolitical events that we have right now.
Yeah. So we have a culture that's made up of mutually reinforcing institutions. People, the way people think about their family, the way people think about their church, the way people think about their job, the way people think about their aspirations in their romantic life, and the way people think about their hobbies. All of those have to come together in a certain way to yield a quality of politics that like you and I would agree with. And I think the right gets this. Right, there's a right focus on the family. There's a right version of like what spirituality means in your life. There's definitely a right version of property. There's like all of these different understandings of their life come together and give you your opponent, right? Like, so he's got a unity in all of the meaningful institutions in his life. And the left couldn't even get behind a CTC in a serious way, right? So like, I think if, for example, if the Democrats actually supported the child tax credit and said like actually families are important and they cost more than we pay you, so we will pay you to reproduce well and give you the resources to do well by your responsibilities as like a parent. That's our that could be our business. That's good for the nation, and there's a public interest in you being a good parent, and we're going to pay you. Like that would be, I think, a good thing for Democrats to do, but we run away from that kind of politics. Right? It can't all be healthcare. People don't, and this is my problem with like healthcare politics in general. People don't live for the sake of life. Right? We don't say the person who lives the longest did it the best. If that were the case, you'd have like Barbara Walters and Martin Luther King, who were both born in 1929. We would say that Barbara Walters did it well because she's still alive. Martin Luther King died, right? Barbara Walters started The View. Obviously, she did life better than Martin Luther King. No, so like life isn't the same as meaningful life. We need to actually understand the constitutive elements of meaning in our life and fund those. And the left really, it's better talking about like basic needs in terms of like biology or even existential needs like climate change, rather than like how are we going to like secure people meaning in their life, and that's and make and enable those institutions. And that's always frustrated me. I spent a stretch as a union organizer too, and people start off talking about wanting a fair a higher wage, because that's a big thing. But really, people stay in and they fight because of the dignity of having a fair say in your workplace. They stay in and fight because they like now for the first time they could stand up. They don't have to like pee in a bottle if you're working for Amazon or anything like that, right? So like the ability to talk about dignity in all of these spheres of life and how the government can support dignity in all of these different spheres of life, including the family, is something that I wish Democrats did better at. So what could we do better with respect to our family politics to take the focus on the family group away from the Republicans and put them in your camp?
Yeah, well, so I think that we need to get back, and I say this all the time. We need to get back to being a left of center party. I feel like the U.S. Well, I'll preface this by saying like the last Democrat and the last left of center president that we had in the country really was Richard Nixon in the 70s, who, by the way, also was advocating for a single payer healthcare system, passes the EPA, goes and makes peace with China, anti-imperial. So it's like and I say that sometimes in at fundraisers, and people are like they'll put back, but they're like actually
unions are doing good, and like yeah.
And so we need to like create a left of center party. I think that it's conventional wisdom outside of the United States that whether it was Obama or Clinton, like the past couple of Democratic presidents that we had in Europe, would be center right politicians in terms of what they advocate, in terms of what they advocate for. And so I think that what we as a party need to do is we need to become a labor party again. We need to be a left of center party again that advocates for working class policy. When it comes to children, it's I have two new nephews, COVID babies this past year, and my brother and my sister, they've got their degrees and they're working hard, but they're struggling, right?
Yeah.
They're struggling to put their kids and their kids have to go to daycare, and the daycare is a fortune. to be able to send kids there. So we need to, we need to be passing this type of policy. And guess what? The Republicans aren't advocating for, for free daycare and stuff like that. So this should be in the Democrats' wheelhouse.
I think so.
The
And it goes
interesting
right
thing
at your financial anxiety too. It goes right at
yes,
you're getting, because like your brother has a lot of financial anxiety around daycare and like college and like everything. Is it your sister or your brother?
both my sister and my brother had kids within a couple of months of each other, COVID
Okay.
babies.
Right.
So
So yeah,
so yeah,
anxiety through the roof, raising
anxiety
kids.
through the roof. Yep.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's we have to be a party that's solving people's financial anxiety.
Right.
And I love the framing that we had at the beginning of the conversation where we were tying the concept of financial anxiety to freedom. And like that's exactly the way that I look at financial anxiety. Financial anxiety is an invisible is an invisible shackle. Is it and sometimes the worst the worst shackles are the ones of the mind. And financial anxiety is real. It causes mental health issues. It causes lots of problems. Not to mention all of the lost realization of a collective prowess of our people that we could be experiencing if people didn't have that financial anxiety.
Yeah, I tell people that like, look, you get a bad diagnosis, you have like a procedure there you have to get, or you break your arm or something like that. You're pissed, you're upset, you're sad, you might be depressed. You get that bill, and you are oppressed, right? So like, it's one thing to have a heart attack or break your leg. It's another thing to get the $2,000 bill for the ambulance, and that's when like the first thing you don't blame your government for. The second thing is like, I'm living, this is screwed up, I'm pissed, right? So like the oppression comes not with the malady, but with the bill. And we need to understand that like the degradation of having like ridiculous healthcare costs isn't necessarily the physical degradation. It's that like now you've stolen like thousands of hours of my work for the next 2 years that I'm going to have to pay in order to pay for this bill because I had to have some procedure taken out. And that's like, you've stolen my labor. What kept me in this awful job that I hate, but now have to stay in because of this bill. And that's where healthcare politics isn't really about life, but is about freedom, because the bill is about taking away your freedom as soon as you get that bill that you can't discharge.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, I think that there are just so many common sense policies, a 30-day vacation policy. The other day I was looking on Wikipedia and just looking at, because I was like, how many countries do the 30-day thing, right? Where it's 30 days, vacation. And I was like looking through, and it's the vast majority of countries around the entire world. And we're talking about, giving, folks a couple of weeks. And it's again, things like that, more time that you can, spend time with your family. Reduce kitchen item budgets from the, reduce budget line items from the kitchen table budget. All things that strengthen, will give you a stronger constitution, in terms of your mental health. And at the same time, you're able to spend more time with your family, and you're able to live just a better quality life. And that's the type of democratic party that I want to be in, is one that is directly advocating for it without means testing. I think means testing is that is the worst thing. That I don't know if it was Democrats invented it. Like, I don't know where the means testing thing comes from, but I think it's probably one of the worst. I don't mean to say a blanket statement. It's probably one of the worst things that exists today, is this concept of means testing.
Yeah, let's put one more form of paperwork between you and this thing that's going to like enable you to do what you need to do. That's great. I just need one more form, and I need to like one more proof that I'm really as poor as I need to be in order to get like a pill. Right. So it's really, yeah, it really is an unfortunate thing. So if you if this doesn't work out, what happened?
You mean like running for office,
Yeah.
or?
Yeah.
So I committed. I have a friend who is an organizing a friend of mine,
Right.
and I made a promise to him when I was playing over the idea of running for office, and he said, "Are you going to run 2 times?" Because he said, are you committed to doing this thing 2 times? And so I made that commitment,
Good for
and
you.
so I am running. I have set this up to run for 4 years because
Good.
that it might take that.
That's deep
Certainly
organizing. That's good.
deep organizing, yeah, and it's great because my whole theory was the entire time was like we're going to strengthen the organizational ecosystem of the high desert, and we've done just that. And I've made so many friends, and we've started DSA chapters and Sunrise chapters, and there are new democratic clubs, and we're doing high school organizing and like the community college organizing, and that is really really exciting. And I have dinners at my place all the time, community potlucks, where we're just coming over, to our place 1, 2, 3 times a week, building and fostering community. And so I'm just going to continue to do that until we have working class progressives at every single level of government. And I think honestly, that's what we need to be doing, not just in my district, but every single district across the country, so that we as progressives are going to get into the school boards, the water boards, the
Yes.
city councils, and the mayoral. We need to be at every single level of government, and that's the way that we're going to be able to win the working class policy that we want and need.
Right. And not just government, also the materials that government uses, right? So it's not just school boards, but we need a curriculum like in school board and like that goes to the school boards. We need the bills that are generated that then go to the representatives. So I agree with the infrastructure. Now you have a density problem in the high desert, right? Like it's hard to get at every voter because there's space between houses.
So it's interesting. The Victor Valley where I am
Right.
right now is pretty. A lot of people are surprised. It's actually pretty dense.
Oh,
There's
good.
about close to 400,000 people in the
Okay.
main population center between Victorville, Hesperia, Apple Valley, Adelanto. So this area here, the way that I describe it to people is it's Las Vegas without the strip. There's a very, very similar, kind of like demographics, and there's a lot of interesting ties. There's even though a lot of the folks here go to LA every day for work, I would say that there's more ties in terms of cultural ties to Las Vegas than to Los Angeles. So that's kind of one thing. Now, for the rest of the district, because it does take 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours to go from one part of the district to the other, we do have a lot of rural communities. The mountain cities, Big Bear, Lake Arrowhead, Running Springs.
Oh, that's in
We've
your
got
district too?
That's in the district too. Yeah, we've got South Redlands, we've got Loma Linda, we've got Joshua Tree, we've got Yucca Valley, we got 29 Palms. We even have Nipton, California, which is a town for sale. And so with some of these more rural areas, we're going to be doing a lot of relational organizing, and that was something that we did. We did on the Bernie campaign. And so relational just basically means you have a volunteer come in, and then you give them a spreadsheet. You say, hey, these are all your neighbors based on your address. Can you help us to identify kind of like what they're where they fall kind of on the spectrum, if they're progressive or where they are. And so we do that type of relational organizing.
Yeah. So when are you going to get into a room full of Republicans?
My neighborhood is exactly that. Like all around me is, in this particular neighborhood where I live, I think it voted 66% for
Okay.
Trump.
Yeah.
And so I live in my neighbors fly the Let's Go Brandon flag. And so
Yeah.
the reality is that I drink beer with them on the weekends. So
Okay.
I'm regularly in touch with a lot of Republicans, and I have really honest conversations, and I've secured a lot of their votes. So they're like, if Trump is top of the ticket, we're going to vote for him, but you're authentic. And so it's so there's an interesting conversation that we have, and I don't hide sort of what I think and feel
Right.
on different topics. So
Yeah, I'm just thinking that your opponent can just like walk into some like mega church or whatever, give his 5-minute spiel, and then pick up 1,000 votes right then. I'm just wondering, when do you get that audience? I guess you got to go to Chamber of Commerce events too, right? So like that's you need to go into that room.
Yeah, the other thing that's interesting to point out is that the Republican advantage has actually collapsed with redistricting because we picked up Loma Linda, and cities like Victorville is D+13, Adelanto is D+18. So the Republican advantage has collapsed to under 3 percentage points at this point, and so it's definitely flippable. And we have the data on who is unregistered. And so, for example, in Adelanto, there are certain neighborhoods where only 2% of eligible Black voters are registered to vote. And so we know that, what we need to do is we need to go in and really it's to help folks, kind of, overcome apathy. And so I've been doing a lot of, there was a bus driver the other day, a Black bus driver, and we were talking and, and he had never been interested in politics before. And so I was just listening to his story. I said, well, so what, like, what would you want your politician to do? And so we were talking about the different things, and we were talking about minimum wage and how hard he has to work. And at the end of the conversation, he said, look, I'm going to go and I'm going to register to vote, and I want to vote for you. And so that was like, that was powerful because I didn't expect him to say that. I was just having a conversation. But so the work there is an element of registering voters and helping folks to kind of recognize and understand their own power and helping folks to realize their own power.
Yeah, I mean, Black people aren't going to have any power in these United States until we get a serious reparations bill, and like we just need to be honest about what that means. But we can talk about that another time. Hey, all right. So tell the people one last thing. You want them to know where you're from, what they can do to support you, and find out more information about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for having me on today. You can go to my website, which is my initials, so dm4ca.com. So it's like Derek Marshall for California. So dm4ca.com, and you can go there. You can sign up to volunteer. We'd love to have folks out here, phone banking or coming out to like knock doors with me. And if you feel called, a small dollar donation would be really appreciated as well. So so thank you all, and thanks for listening, and thank you for the conversation. You've left me inspired with some new framing that I can use.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, and we might talk to him again. All right.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.